Hey, what's up, everybody? Rob Marzullo here, Ram Studio Comics. Welcome back. So I'm getting ready to color this piece here. I've already started, obviously, and I just thought, this is probably a good opportunity to show you guys a couple tips for some coloring techniques. Now, I always admit that I'm not the most fantastic colorist on the planet. I'm probably in the top 10 million thousand. I don't. I'm just not that proficient at it. But I'll figure I share what I can so I can help people. Like I always tell people, we're all teachers. We can always help people that are a little bit lower on the food chain or whatever the ladder than we are. But obviously, pros are going to look at this and go, "Oh, you're not doing it right, or you could do it better." Blah blah blah. So I'm just going to share what I can. So essentially, first what I want to show you by comparison is like here's the flats to another style of painting that I just did for a course, and then this was like the end result. Okay, so this is a digital painting style, and this isn't what I'm going to show today. I just want to show you a comparison. Also, if you want to take that course, I'm not going to, twist your arm or nothing, but if you want to know more about that, there's content for that on my various sites, and I'll leave links in the description box below. So to this part, what I want to show you here is when doing coloring for comics, generally the way that I'll do it is I'll segment each thing on layers with flats. Okay, so you've probably heard the term flats, and essentially I'll start from the background. I usually set the very background color first, kind of almost like a mood color. Um, and I need to study color theory a lot more, and I'm working on that. I'm actually studying it more, and I'll share more of that on the channel as I learn more. But you need to be really aware of how certain colors make other areas in the painting stand out, or if they complement, or they convey a certain mood. All these things. So color theory is very important. Um, so essentially, like if you get to say the skin tone here of this character, for instance, there's a couple ways to do this. I like segmenting the work, then locking transparent pixels right there. Now I can't go outside of the confinements of this layer, which is nice. I like to use a smooth painter brush, and what I will typically do, let's say I want to start with the light source, and I'm perceiving that the light source could either be a reflection off the moon, which makes a lot of sense, the light that it casts and reflects off objects in the sky, essentially. So I know the light source is behind the character. So generally what I'll do is I'll start with that. Now I could say, well, the moon is a bit of a yellow glow, for instance, right? So I could do that. I actually want to try something different with this, but I just want to start here and kind of show you, what to maybe try, and then, work through that. So essentially, I could start with this kind of yellow edge lighting. Now, one of the things that generally will happen as you convey a light source, especially a pretty strong light source on the edge of something, it will generally change and shadow the next color a little bit. So let's say that this light maybe makes it over to there. I don't know that it would, but we're just going to kind of pinball around and test it. I'm always kind of checking things and trying things and then going back and forth, especially when it comes to color, just because I always feel a little bit more like I'm going to know it when I see it, kind of thing. So let's say that that's our yellowish glow from the moonlight kind of thing. But by itself, it doesn't really work. It wouldn't look just like that. Obviously, there's going to be more shadow on this side of the skin tone as well. But generally, what you might see is a little bit of blue in the skin tone, kind of a bluish gray. Let's try that. And it generally will kind of, if I can get this to mix properly with this particular brush, I may have to use more of a blending mode. Yeah, I'm not liking the look of that, and it may just be the wrong color, but so this is where I want to get into some other things that you can try. Say you go to paint and you're like, oh, I want to add this shadow here, and it's not dark enough, you want to try different levels of saturation. So as you go up and down here, you've got your, your kind of, I don't know if that's viscosity. I don't want to use the terms because I'll slaughter them, but you could tell it gets brighter over here, darker here, less saturated, more saturated, whatever, up and down, and you got your color wheel on the outside. So you want to constantly kind of play around with this and move things around. You want to test bits of this color. I'm almost thinking that I want to see a little bit of transition of the blue off the light source. So generally what will happen is after you get a pretty significant light source, let's try the soft brush, set the shadow, And let's even try multiply. I usually have some success with this brush. You'll generally get a little bit darker, and this is too dark, but transition right through there. And that looks horrible. So let's go back again, Command Z, and see what else we can try here. Now the other thing, after I try this a few times, I can't really get it right like that, I'll try something else. So let's try right-clicking here, select from layer, create selection. This obviously gives me another confinement. I can add a new layer over top, go back to my smooth painter, and try this one more time. Or, I shouldn't say one more time. I'm going to try it as many times as it takes to get it right. But, I always, always tense up when I'm doing the videos because I'm like, okay, do I got to start the video over so that I don't look like I don't know what I'm talking about here? But, I think part of what this channel needs to be for people is showing them that, my failures as much as my success. I mean, I could sit there and do retakes all day long and only show you when I get it right. And obviously that does save time for the viewer, which makes sense in that regard, but it doesn't show you how I persevere through something, how I ultimately just keep picking at it until I figure it out. So that's getting closer. It's still not right, but what, it's starting to make the skin tone look more, in shadow on this side, and that's what I'm looking for. So generally, you'll see a little bit of blue. It still doesn't feel right though, so I'm going to keep working with that. And also, let's check it from a distance. The shape of the muscles looks really funky there, so I'm going to delete that. But it is on another layer. And by doing this, let's go back to the soft brush one more time. Let's take the combine mode off here. Let's just shadow the muscle for now. Like this. So all this to be in shadow. So you see I'm applying it pretty heavily and pretty, across the entire area. And then I'm going to come over here and try some of the blending modes. And I always say blending modes because that's what they are in Photoshop, and that's where I first started learning to use these, but they are called combine modes inside of Manga Studio here. Clip Studio Paint. So that's looking a bit more like a shadow color. I still feel like it needs some more, but what's going to happen too is I'm also going to do things like, let's set this to transparent and erase back and get some bounce light on the muscles here. So there's going to be areas where, you just get a little bit more light source kind of peering through. Now, this is just one way to do it, okay? And this is applying soft shadows. And generally, I will do a little bit with soft shadows, almost first, I guess. I'll also play with the opacity here because I want to really slowly build up to the forms. I want to slowly see the work kind of come together so that I can make judgment calls and different things. But the other thing I want to show you, that's the way that you do it for your soft shadows. So you see on the edge, I kind of got some hard shadow effects. I'd probably continue with that. So, I could take Alt, select that first color. Maybe there's a little bit of bounce light over here. Probably wouldn't make it over there, or edge lighting maybe. But, I like to imagine where the light could go. It's not necessarily that it's always going to be entirely correct, but, as correct as we can get it, obviously. So I just play around with adjusting that and throwing it in here and there and seeing what I can come up with. But you can get some pretty good hard edge effects this way. Now, typically for comic coloring, the way that most people are going to do it is going to be a build-up in this regard, where they kind of select the areas more like this. I don't do that as much, but I will do some of that just to kind of illustrate it. So we'll come down here to the leg, and we'll say, okay, we want a little bit more light source. We want to round out these shapes. Obviously, there's going to be more shadow on this inner part of the leg. So let's get that in place. I'll just select from, was this the color? I didn't think I hadn't keep that, did I? But we'll go ahead and use this just for a shadow color like this. So this is getting in a little bit of our soft edge shadows. And I didn't make that selection again. Now keep in mind, if you're going to keep making the selection, you want to save yourself a step. Not like it's a big deal to really do that right there, but you can just go right click, select from layer, create selection, save it as a convert to selection layer. Take the visibility off so you don't have the Incredible Hulk's little brother there. and then you can just click that, or it kind of looks like Samson, doesn't it? I didn't even think of that. For anybody that knows who Samson is. So basically, click that, and it's just a really quick way to get that selection. So again, if you find yourself really, reusing your selection, just do that. It's really fast, and you're ready to rock. You don't even have to jump off the existing layer, which is nice. So you can go Command D to deselect. You're on this layer that you're working on. Where is it? Right there. But then you can just hit selection. I guess it does jump, my bad. Scratch that last comment, will you? Okay, so now get in some of that soft shadow. Remember not to just not shade in one direction as well. So you want to think about it like you're shading from the bottom up right here, but then also maybe the upper body is casting a shadow here, and this is really where you'd create a hard edge shadow. But I just want to get you to look at the shadows as you're rounding the forms in multiple directions. You're not just rounding. For one, I think in the beginning we tend to do this. We trace every muscle like this. And at first we're like, whoa, that looks cool. Like it's way too much. But, at first you're just happy with anything, I think. But then you realize that you got to think about the entirety of the leg. You do some separation from muscle to muscle, but the more you do that, generally it looks more amateurish and not as well thought out, I guess. But you'll get a little bit of that in there. But you got to think about the overall, leg as a shape. You're going to get a little bit more shadow through here and a drop shadow on the top, things like that. Okay, so now we've got that kind of isolated. We've got some soft shadows in place. Now, typically for comic coloring, you're going to see a lot more of this right here where artists are really good at selecting kind of the top areas. And I generally will draw these in, so I'm going to show you both ways real quick. This video is probably already getting lengthy. So I'm not the best at doing this, and I also don't like how this bar pops up, so I'll show you what I do. It's probably not the right way, but I hold shift and I create another selection down here that I know I'm not going to hit when I'm painting. And I also like to zoom in a bit more here so I can see if I've got any imperfections to the way I'm doing this. And then I'll select, I'm trying to perceive just this kind of top edging, not really into that yellow light source. So again, I'm almost doing that overly segmented thing I just talked about, but this isn't going to be as apparent because I'll show you in a second here. So it's kind of like, this layer over top, so everything is, layers and kind of overlaid effects, I guess. So let's create one more layer just to test this. Let's grab a soft brush. Let's grab a little bit brighter light source of the skin tone. And let's just brush this in. And what I like to do here is just kind of test it and then deselect. And check the work. So that's kind of okay. It's not really what I'm looking for, so I'm going to go back a few times. Remember with Manga Studio, Clip Studio Paint, you hit Command Z to go back, Command Y to go forward. So I usually go back one extra step just to make sure I'm right where I need to be. Okay, so soft brush again. Let's pick a little bit brighter saturated color. Make sure we're on normal mode. We are. So that's already looking a touch better. I'll really slowly work this up. Now, notice too, right here, I've got a bit of weird edging. That's one of the reasons I don't like to do it this way, because I always seem to get it a bit off. I actually take the G pen, set real low, and I guess with a little bit of anti-aliasing, get that selection back. I'll generally draw it in, and actually I don't want to do it on this because I'm going to have to change the effect, but I'll show you here in a second what I do there. So there's that selection, there's that that edging, and I'll generally blend at least one side off or erase it off, or any number of ways you can do it. But we'll take the soft erase and then we'll just soften this up. So now we're pushing it back into that other information. I generally will just do the one side here. And that's how you can get kind of a cell shaded effect. And you got to do a series of build-ups. A lot of guys will get really good at just kind of overlaying these effects. So they might do it again. Again, I get this little bar out of the way. Hold shift to add to the selection, alt to subtract from the selection. And I might do it one more time with even a brighter light source. Yeah, and I'm not the greatest at it, but that's essentially how it's done. You can do that with the shadows, with the highlights. Again, I use more of the smooth watercolor for the way that I like to do it, smooth painter brush, but this is just a way to do it. Now, the other way that I'll tend to apply these kind of effects when I'm looking for them is I will actually create another layer over top. So I'm gonna get that out of there. Well, I'll show it by comparison here in a second, but I'm gonna add a new layer, and I'll draw this in with any color really, it doesn't matter at this point, but I'm going to use the G pen to draw this in. So this is just the way that I like to do it, but obviously there's lots of different ways to get it done. So the reason I like doing it this way, I typically just like to draw more than I like to create selections. I also don't have as much confidence with the selection tool in that way in this particular program. Not really sure why that is. I actually fare a lot better with it inside of Photoshop. I use the selection tool quite a bit there, but here I just tend to draw in selections. So, it looks like it's taking me a little longer, but you get faster at it as you itemize the work and just do certain parts of it. And I don't even know if the highlight would be anywhere near where I'm putting it. I'm more focused on just explaining the technique here. So what I'm perceiving is that I want there to be some kind of highest point to this these muscle groups right here. So I'm just drawing that in, and yeah, you can see it does take quite a bit longer, so you may just want to invest the time into getting better with the selection tool, or maybe I do. But for now, this is the way I'm going to do it, and I do feel like it picks up speed once I do more and more of this. So, but see, I get rid of those little hiccups on the side, those little bumps that I get from the other way of selecting. Let's try something like that. So there's my highest point. I like transparency, and there's a couple ways you could think about it. You could start with your brightest light source. You could grab the highlight brush like this, set to is it color dodge or glow dodge or add glow, any of these really, but let's try color dodge. Yeah, so you could take the same color, you can punch up the light source like this, make sure it's a bit brighter, or quite a bit brighter, and then you can soft erase and really take the same brush to set it to transparency, and then you can push the edges back. So again, you don't want the that hard edge to be around every side. I usually will soften all of it up at least a little, but then one side more heavily than the other. That's kind of how you direct the light source with this particular effect. And then always check the work from a distance, because it's always going to, you need to see everything from back here to really make a good judgment call. So I'll push all this information back. And again, I just continue to build up to that process. So now if I put the other one in place, you see it's kind of a similar effect, just two different ways of applying that effect. But again, my favorite way really is just using this smooth watercolor brush and smooth painter. But if you, I just want you to be aware, if you have the regular version and you haven't done any custom brushes, this will be your smooth watercolor brush right there. So that's why I keep saying that. Okay, so one last thing I want to show. Well, we'll go ahead and work on Dracula's face here, since he's got this huge vitamin D deficiency going on. Let's jump over to here. Let's grab his skin right there, and I'll show you a similar approach and how you can get a lot of it done just with this one brush. So if I take, let's see, I want a bit of a bright blue. That's probably too saturated. So for the edge lighting, now remember, his edge lighting doesn't have to match the scene really, because he's obviously not this big, and he's just, this is an effect of him looking down at the opposing threat of Simon Belmont. So really the lighting you know, entirely can be totally different because you're not really within this capacity or this scene like this. So you can really have fun with these kind of collages. I think that's what it's called, collage. It's a fun word, collage. Okay, so you know what I would do here is just start sculpting. Basically, is the way I look at it. I almost feel like I'm working in ZBrush and trying to model something. So I'll put in all these flat planes, you know, and this is more painterly, but you can really get it to look comic book if you just, you know, chisel out some more of the edges. I do like a mix where, you know, it's got some nice soft painterly effects in there as well. And then obviously you can get all fancy and color the line work too. I don't do as much of that as I should, but as long as your line work is on a separate layer like this is, you just go to that line work up here, lock that, and you could start, you know, brushing in some, you know, you pick like a darker blue, I would suppose, maybe. You know, you can get in some of the line work colorization too, so it's pretty easy to do. Again, as long as you made sure to make your inks a floating layer. Where was I? Oh no, I got lost. This is why you don't deviate from what you're doing. Okay. All right, right there. So yeah, I'm gonna just kind of freestyle this. I'm gonna say there's some bounce light over here, which there probably wouldn't be. And then obviously, if you want to really round this out, you want to think about, okay, what other color can I introduce as a dramatic color back here? So I really could use the yellow light source on the side of the face. It'd probably look good, but I'm trying to think of another color for a bit of edge lighting. So back where I'm applying this blue to really, you know, set kind of a mood. Let's try, I don't know if this will work. Again, I got to study more color theory. I'm going to try a bit of orangish red. No, that's not going to work, is it? That might work. It's a little too heavy, but let me just continue with the direction I was going. So I'll just keep with this blue kind of throughout, which is going to make it appear a little less, you know, dynamic. So, but this is where I would actually, you know, since I don't know enough about color theory, I'd start studying that real quick and pull some reference. One thing I will recommend is just grab some awesome colors from somebody else's work and just, you know, just study that and pick from it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that in the beginning to really beef up your skills rather quickly. So I'm sure a bunch of people are thinking right now, I can't believe you just said that. Did you just say steal somebody's colors? But hey, that's what the alt picker's for. Or again, I guess if you wanted, you could just pick it from a nice photography shot. If that makes you feel, you know, sleep a little better at night, you could do that. So these colors are too saturated. I can definitely see that now, so I should be dumbing that down. But hopefully you can see with this brush that you can do a lot of pretty cool effects. I mean, this is probably going to lean a little bit more towards painterly unless I start chiseling some of these shapes in. But let me show you how you could take this and start to chisel in some harder edge shadows. Now, I can do it right on this layer. You know, the more confident you get with this brush, just remember as you're bearing down, you're getting kind of the opaqueness of the solid shape. And then as you lighten up and increase the brush size, you can blend really well. But the more you blend, the less you're going to get that comic book kind of hard edge effect that is, and they're not all hard edges, but there's a lot of that in the style. So it depends on what you're after. So let me get a few more base shadows in place. So we got to think about there being a shadow. You know, like it's pretty simple when you start to try to chisel things out. You got to think about the cheek being one big shape. So a highlight here, probably it's going to get a bit darker before it goes into the interior of the face. So you can get that in there like that. But then there's going to be a drop shadow right here from the cheek, and then it's going to pick back up This is another little separation, then there's a highlight on the mouth, and it just goes back and forth. Uh, so it does become a little bit easier to process when you start, realizing the shapes, becoming more aware of the shapes that you're trying to go for. Then the light sources become a little bit easier, but I stick with a pretty basic understanding of all that, and just get her done. Anyways, but so yeah, so a little drop shadow on the lip there, and again, I should probably switch this color. I'm putting too much of this color throughout probably, but just getting in some base information. And then I can quickly jump to a soft brush. Let's desaturate this a bit. Let's even bring this to, well, we use the shadow brush and go to multiply. We're still on the lock transparency there. So then I can round out, kind of the larger shapes. Right through there, side of the nose, under the nose. Multiply is great because it darkens everything kind of together. And, again, we want to see a little bit of shadow transition. So whenever you get that strong light source, you're going to get a little bit of shadow to the edge of that light source. That's what this is. It's going to be pretty much darker all through here. Okay, so now say I want a little bit of the hard edge effect in the ear, like a drop shadow. I can just select through here and do something like this, kind of perceive the way it would curve with, that came out funky, hold on. But I'm trying to show the shape change in there a bit. I don't want to just go straight across that, I guess. And then glance across that a couple times, deselect, and so there's a little bit of that hard edge shadow that we're looking for. Again, just trying to round out some of these shapes in here. Under the neck, you're probably going to get another hard edge shadow of some kind. So yeah, I really just do not like the selection tool. I hate to say that because I love this program, but I'm not a big fan of the selection tool. Just seems to slide around a bit more. It's a little more prone to accident. I don't know. Like it's touchy. It's touchy. Okay, so back here it's looking a little weird still. We'll liven it up, but that's essentially how I get it started. And then now, as I want to get in some of those other hard edge shapes, hard edge shadows, whatever. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and create a selection again. Right click, select from layer, create selection. Let's add a new layer over top. Again, if I think I'm going to need to grab this selection rather quickly a few times, just select, convert to selection layer. There it is. And you can name it, obviously, double click there, name it or whatever. We don't really need to, I don't think. So I want this, it doesn't, and keep in mind, it doesn't matter where these selections are. You just want to keep them convenient for you as the way you paint, but you could really save these all in their own layer group or whatever, or group, not layer. Okay, so now we want to add this, we're going to go back to the smooth painter, and I want to get in some hard edge shadows, and let me see, maybe even change this a bit. I'm always each interval that I add something, I'm always changing it a little bit just to see if I can get the most out of it, just to see if it looks a little bit better. You really just don't want to get in the habit of using the same color every time you paint something. Even something as simple as this, you want to mix it up a bit, I think. If not, it'll just have a very uninteresting appeal by the time you're done. So what I'm going to do here is kind of do the shadows, and it's almost like that technique I showed you earlier, where we're basically kind of drawing in a selection almost. So I'm drawing in these hard edge shapes. They're a little bit blended because as I softly push the paint around, I'm kind of blending some of the edges as I go here. It's pretty easy to make sure that majority of it, if not all of it, if you want, can have a solid edge. Let's see, we're really trying to bring out that cheekbone, which that's a little much, but then what we'll do is we'll go back with the brush larger and almost just the weight of my hand, and we'll push some of this back. So it's kind of a neat way to check the work as you go. So you're basically placing it, you know, analyzing it, seeing if it works, seeing if it could be better, and then, you know, pushing it back, blending it back, whatever you got to do. So what I tend to do here is try to change the shapes, the existing shapes of what's there. So that cheekbone's like a bit ridiculous, but it is, you know, it's Dracula, so it kind of makes sense, I guess. I definitely like the look of it on the brow. I cannot talk today. What in the world? I need more coffee. But I like the look of it. It's on the brow. I don't like it as much on the cheekbone, but then I'll show you how we can, again, kind of adjust the work as we progress. I just want it to be almost overdone for the effect I'm going for. So I'm going to shade all through here. I want a pretty heavy shadow right through here. Pretty strong hard edge shadow right through here. So again, these are just judgment calls. You see I kind of messed up right there a little bit. Okay. Again, kind of show this separation here a bit more. Let's check it from a distance, see if this is even working. Yeah, so just like I thought from being zoomed in, the cheekbone is too strong, and let me see here. Probably should be working from back here really. I can get little bits of drop shadow on the little angry parts of the skin and the mad face. Why is Dracula always mad? It's like, come on, man, lighten up. Okay, so let's try that, and then now let's go back, let's soft erase. Now remember, you can turn any brush, including this one, to a transparent. So you can jump back in here and you can push back the hard edge effects that you need to, like this. So I wanted this kind of more solid edge to the chin, give them a strong chin line. And then, you know, like areas like this, I'm going to make the brush larger and just kind of push some of that back. It's just too much right there. Likewise, I could just go glance across the whole area just real softly and push that information back. So that's kind of really the process I use for what I consider comic book style cell shading kind of thing, you know, and then I just keep building up from there. So again, it's still very basic because it's all kind of uniformly lit, and it's got some feature lines, but it's just not, you know, it could be a lot better, you know, and as we progress and keep overlaying the work, it'll get better and better, you know, add some highlights to the hair, you know, you can lock transparency here, grab that highlight brush, go to a bit of a blue or something like that, and make sure to drop your selection or it won't work. All right, that's too saturated. You know, and just so on and so forth. You just keep building up on it. So, you know, as far as the skin tone, one thing that I would probably do is try to add in some kind of something to liven it up a bit, some other color basically. So let's try that real quick before I call this video good. So again, we can grab the selection of the face real quick. We can add a layer over top. We want to pick a different color. Now, generally, you want the effect that he's dead or whatever. So, you know, you don't want to like put in too much pink or whatever, but generally if you're trying to liven up a character, you're going to put a little bit of pink or rose color on the cheeks or something like that. We'll try a little bit of that, but I'm thinking maybe a green for some reason to really push the dead factor, but let's try this first. So shadow, multiply. Again, it's on a floating layer, so we can drop this in. See how it looks, kind of, again, check the work. You know, you're going to generally put, the way this works, you're generally going to put it more evident in areas, like for him, it's probably going to be around the eyes. You want to give this very kind of, you know, he hasn't slept in ages. You know, so you give them kind of these reddish eyes, reddish ears. I don't know, but generally it's the areas that are thinner skinned. You know, as far as getting realism to a person. You know, so you put in like the ears, the lips. But for old Dracul here, we'll put more around the eyes to zombify them a bit or something. But the main thing of parts like this is that it's just better that you have something. You know, you want to, again, play around with this effect, try a variety of colorization techniques, and really work up to it. Try some different colors, try some different combine modes, and see how far you can push the work that way. So I almost like something more subtle like that. Try overlay. Let's try a bit. Again, always move these colors around so that you can try some different things. Check it from a distance. Yeah, I don't know that I like that. Let's see. I was almost thinking some green in the shadows. But at any rate, hopefully you get that it's just a series of techniques that if you utilize these, the main thing I really wanted to showcase here today was that you can really get a lot out of this type of brush. Again, you won't see it as smooth painter unless you know, got some of these brushes or whatever, but it's the smooth watercolor brush that comes standard inside of Manga Studio. If you have any trouble finding it, I'll make sure to give access to this particular brush. Maybe I'll just do that. I'll make this brush available on my Gumroad. There'll be a link in the description box below, and you guys can get access and play around with that. The rest of them are all standardized brushes for sure. So yeah, so hopefully this video has been helpful. Really not liking that last layer I did, but I would just keep building up on it and keep doing the same effects that I showed you here until I get it right. So let me know what you think in the comments section below, what you'd like to see in the future. As always, keep drawing, keep having fun, and I will talk to you soon.